You'll see the S's, and away they go on the parade lap. And as they move away from the start-finish line, crucial information at this point already, and that's that Michael Schumacher is starting on brand new tyres. I saw the telltale white labels there, whilst it looked very much as if the Williams cars were starting on used tyres. There we can, although that hill at the front looks maybe as if he's on new, but certainly Schumacher we know is on new tyres. Now the significance of that is that it should help Schumacher's pace in the early stages, but he'll need to be ahead with some free track in front of him to do that. Now this is the block change part, second gear down to 100 kilometres per hour or 60 miles an hour at the slowest part, and that's the Minardi there of Luco Badoa, who's clearly stalled on the grid, and if they can get that car going, he'll be starting right from the back of the grid. And they'll be around about one-third of the way through the circuit now. This is now coming up towards the one-third point through the Stag corner, leading up to the corner that Hakkinen crashed at Brewery.
Yes, you see it now, the right hand. You can see the curb on the left-hand side of that where he lost it going in and jumped over that curb and ended up on the tyre barriers, which I'm happy to say that they've increased to a width of 3 now instead of just the single one that he hit. Going down Sir Jack Brabham Straight, weaving from side to side, putting heat in those tyres, of course. Michael Schumacher, as Jonathan stated, on brand new tyres. You will have had the heat warmers on, but they're still generating wall heat through the tyres by weaving backwards and forwards. Obviously Schumacher on new tyres is desperate to do a really good start and try and build out some sort of a quick lead, which he's been famous for. One of the problems with Adelaide, of course, is that there are quite a lot of bumps going into the corners, and if you do pull out from behind the slipstream of somebody going into the corner, not only do you have the normal problems about braking them, but once you start getting onto the bumps, the tyres lose adhesion with the surface, and that creates just another problem altogether.
That's one of the few passing places on the course, as Bertrand Gachot, the Belgian driver in the Pacific, brings up the rear, and the men ahead of him turn very gently into the Adelaide hairpin to take up their positions on the grid. You will, as usual, see them peel off to left and right. We're with David Coulthard now, second on the grid. Damon Hill is already in position. You can see Michael Schumacher behind Damon Hill. This is Gerhard Berger's car, fourth on the grid, and David Coulthard is in front of him. Now we're with Michael Schumacher, or we're looking forward at Damon Hill. 81 laps of the Adelaide track, the grand finale for Adelaide of the Australian Grand Prix, the 11th wonderful year. The green flag. David Coulthard boils his tyres, but Damon Hill edges ahead and moves to the right to try and cut off Coulthard, and he fails to do so. Coulthard leads, and Hill is in second place, and the two Ferraris are up, which means to say that Michael Schumacher is down, and everybody gets through the S's. So it's Coulthard, Hill, Berger, Alesi. Schumacher is down to 5th position. So Michael Schumacher has got a bad start, and that gives an enormous advantage to Damon Hill and an even greater advantage to David Coulthard, because the young Scotsman in his last race for Williams leads in Adelaide. Here they come. It's Coulthard, Hill, Berger, Alesi, Schumacher, who's got it all to do, because the Ferraris are slower, or were in the warm-up, than Michael Schumacher, and they will inevitably holding up with Berger turning into the hairpin, and Schumacher goes through and takes the Ferrari of Jean Alesi, moves up into 4th place on the first lap. Michael Schumacher has got the bit between his teeth. We're almost at the end of the first lap now. Coming down to the Adelaide hairpin, that is it. There is Michael Schumacher. Behind him, the Ferrari. Turn in, drive out. Damon Hill crosses the line second behind Coulthard. And Coulthard is 1.6 seconds ahead.
That's a fabulous lead for lap 1. I mean, David Coulthard really is becoming a master of getting it on in the first couple of laps, and that's a very important quality to have, because if you can get some sort of a lead in the first couple of laps, by gee, that saves you a lot of time later on.
But was that a straight, no-problem start for David Coulthard? Round about lap 5 or lap 6, we sometimes get the indication that a driver has jumped the start, and he has to have a 10-second penalty. Jonathan, how did it look to you? Well, certainly from looking head on the screen, it's difficult to say that that was a jump start, but again, we won't know until they come in. But look, this is interesting now. Schumacher has got these brand new tyres on, and he's really capitalising on that extra grip that they've got. Let's have a look now. And, well, it did look a little bit quick, I must say. That was definitely Coulthard moving away earlier. Now, we didn't have the lights to see to know exactly how it compared. Look at the way that Hill tries to squeeze Coulthard. Coulthard, though, stays with it, and he goes around the outside. That's a brave move from David Coulthard. Watch how John Lacey comes by with the Benetton and Schumacher being relegated back there to 5th place. So great driving there from David Coulthard. Believe me, it is not easy. They would have been braking from about 140 miles an hour down to about 100 to turn in there. Now we've got Schumacher right on the back of Berger, and it could be at the end of Wakefield Street that he's going to get a chance to get by. And this is David Coulthard's first race in Adelaide. He's leading Damon Hill, who's now the fastest on the track, and Schumacher attacks. Schumacher has a look at Gerhard Berger's Ferrari, and Schumacher is now over 5 seconds on lap 3 behind race leader David Coulthard, and it's giving the young Scotsman every opportunity to pull away. Lap 3, race order, as you watch the battle between Gerhard Berger and Michael Schumacher for 3rd position. Coulthard leads, Hill is 2nd, Berger, Schumacher 3rd and 4th. Lacey is 5th, Heinz-Harald Frentzen is in 6th position, and Johnny Herbert has moved up to 7th. And here's where Schumacher needs to be right with Gerhard Berger, coming down the Brabham Straight there. Is he going to be close enough to have a look at the inside and try and outbrake Berger? It doesn't look like it at the moment. And we can see that he's having a look. Is he going to go? No, Berger doesn't have to even close the door particularly hard. But I think we may well see another attempt by Michael Schumacher. He's going to be desperate to get by the Ferrari, because the Ferrari will be holding Schumacher up by at least a second a lap. And that's all time that Schumacher is losing. Precious time he's losing, of course, to Coulthard and Hill up in front, who are now some 3 seconds ahead of Berger. And of course they have got Schumacher on those new tyres is losing his advantage while he's bottled up behind Gerhard Berger. We're into lap 4 already in this 81 lap race, and David Coulthard has gone faster than Damon Hill to increase his lead to 1.8 seconds on lap 4. Gerhard Berger, there he is. Michael Schumacher, there he is. Austrian in the Ferrari, German in the Benetton.
That's a very good point, Murray. Starting on brand new tyres like that, the advantage that he would have had he got a good start has been totally lost, because he's now being held up by Berger and allowing the 2 Williams to get away. Look how the expertise and the experience of Gerhard Berger, a double race winner here at Adelaide, is paying off. That is Montemini, and he spins the Pacific, spins safely, and that's in the start and finish area as he approaches the S's. Over the curbs, here is race leader David Coulthard. Sensational Adelaide is living up to its reputation. Montemini is out of the Pacific, he's perfectly okay, and look at the gap between Damon Hill, who is 3rd, and Gerhard Berger. So Damon Hill, who is 2nd, and Gerhard Berger, who is 3rd. It is now 7 seconds, but Phil has got Coulthard well in sight. Lacey is 1.5 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, and Gerhard Berger battling for that 3rd position. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is only a second back in 6th position. Johnny Herbert is 7th, and Irvine is 8th, and we're into lap 5. Immensely frustrating for Michael Schumacher here, because in fact Berger is lapping 1.5 seconds slower than David Coulthard. Unless it looks like the Williams cars are really sprinting, and that you might think is consistent with making 3 stops with their light fuel load, that fastest lap from Damon Hill at 1 minute 18.2 is still nearly 3 seconds away from their qualifying form. So at the moment they may well be just going for 2 stops, but the crucial thing is that they continue to pull out that big margin over Gerhard Berger, and they'll be really grateful for Berger holding up Schumacher. It looks like he's still doing it, and they're on the main overtaking opportunity. This could be a chance now if it's going to happen. Berger tries to stop him, but Schumacher has got alongside, and Berger has to give way. Schumacher took good care not to outbrake himself and run wide, so Gerhard Berger was not able to retake the lead he had over Schumacher. And just look how fast Michael Schumacher is pulling away. He's only been ahead for about 500 metres. Now this is going to be the first lap that Schumacher's done without traffic in front of him. We're going to have to look at the lap time carefully to see whether or not he can indeed match the pace of the Williams duo ahead. Well, the gap at the end of lap 5 between Coulthard and Schumacher was 10.7 seconds.
Schumacher is ahead of the Ferrari that we're riding with now, and pulling away, as Jonathan has pointed out, as they go up to the Markets turn, from the Markets turn into Stag turn, from Stag down to Brewery Bend, and we're with Michael Schumacher, we're with Gerhard Berger in the Ferrari now. Look at the gap between him and Michael Schumacher. There are Lacey and Frentzen in the background, and tight up behind Frentzen is Johnny Herbert. In fact, there is only 1.5 seconds between John Lacey, who is 5th, and Johnny Herbert, who is in 7th place. Great racing in Australia. So there is Lacey. Frentzen in the Sauber. Herbert in the Benetton.
Frenson's making really good inroads onto Lacey, and I expect him to be looking for a passing move within a couple of laps, I would imagine. And Johnny Herbert's doing a great job hanging on to Frentzen.
Yes, indeed. Of course, Frenson's problem is going to be that he does not have the straight line speed advantage to come anywhere near overtaking the Ferraris on the straight. Now, the Benetton is pretty equal with the Ferrari in straight line performance, and that enabled Schumacher to make use of the toe and to then get by Berger. But I think Frentzen is indeed going to close up on Lacey. Lacey has been very frustrated, and well, you see, now, do you know, that incident that we just saw then is only controllable by someone of Lacey's sort of reactions. You know, a lot of drivers would have lost control and spun there, Alan.
I agree. I mean, he's got fantastic car control, and quite rightly, I've seen many a guy get it not quite that shape out of shape and end up in the wall.
And meantime, Michael Schumacher is not, I repeat, not closing the gap on Damon Hill and Coulthard. Coulthard is the fastest on the track. 1 minute 18.0, and Schumacher is 10.9, nearly 11 seconds behind it.
Well, it's not exactly right, Murray, because Schumacher's lap time is within 0.2 of a second now. He's picked up 1.3 seconds in lap time. He is indeed closing the gap, and it looks like Schumacher is capable of lapping at the same level as Hill, and that graphic that we saw meant that the gap was 9.1 seconds previously, and it was then 9.5. So it's very close indeed between the two at the moment.
Lap 7, here's the world champion, the double world champion, going for those 10 wins. 10.9 seconds was the gap between him and Coulthard. And it's a very nervous car, the Benetton. That's where Schumacher went off in practice last year. It's what we call a pointy car. Michael Schumacher likes it that way, so that the front really sticks to the ground and follows where he points it, and the back of the car has to look after itself. That suits Schumacher down to the ground. It suited Nigel Mansell down to the ground. That was his style too. It does not suit Johnny Herbert down to the ground, and his setup has to be much the same as Michael Schumacher's for team reasons, and he is in 7th position, Herbert.
And those graphics then indicate that Schumacher's actually closed the gap by 0.2 of a second on Damon Hill at that point, because the figure in brackets is that from the previous lap. Hill's responding. Hill knows that he's really got a charge now. He will have been told on his radio, even if he can't see Schumacher in his mirrors, that Schumacher is now free from being held up by Berger. The cushion, the potential advantage that may have gone on a lot longer is there no more for the Williams drivers.
Damon Hill holds the lap record, 1 minute 15.4. He's the fastest on the track at the moment, 1 minute 17.9, with a heavier fuel load at the beginning of the track. And as you can see, he's beginning to edge up on his teammate, David Coulthard. There is the visual gap between the Williams driver, David Coulthard, his first Australian Grand Prix. Well, David Coulthard won in Portugal. He took pole position several times, 4 or 5 times this year to be exact, and it's his first full season of Grand Prix racing. Next year to McLaren, this year he intends to win here in Australia. He's certainly going about it the right way. We are not far off 1/10 distance now in this 81 lap race with David Coulthard and Damon Hill. There is Hill, first and second, with just about 1.5 seconds behind them. Coulthard is 11 seconds ahead of Schumacher, and Johnny Herbert there in the second of these two cars is right up behind Frentzen, who is in 6th place. So the Sauber Ford is ahead of the Benetton Renault. Now that's the Sauber ahead of us. And off goes Gachot, Bertrand Gachot. He kept his engine running. It's all too easy to stall it, but he kept the engine running, and that's Frentzen ahead of us. Frentzen, who is in 6th position. We're riding with Johnny Herbert.
Now, I think we can expect to see Herbert do little about Frentzen until they come around to the main straight once again, because Frentzen I think will be about as quick as Herbert through the twisty sections, but Herbert's probably got about a 5 miles an hour, that's 8 kilometres per hour speed advantage on that straight. So I'll be very surprised if Herbert cannot manage to get by Frentzen on this next lap down the main straight.
We desperately need to know the fuel strategies of David Coulthard and Damon Hill in comparison with Schumacher. They are both lapping faster than the German at the present moment. The lead of David Coulthard over Schumacher, who is third, is up to 11.5 seconds. There's 9.7 seconds between Schumacher third and Hill in second position. And Johnny Herbert continues to press Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Between them, Gerhard Berger is still fourth. Jean Alesi is still fifth. But Berger is now 17, nearly 18 seconds behind the top three.
Johnny Herbert really wants to get a good run through that right-hander. We just saw them coming out to be able to take advantage of getting a slipstream past Frentzen, and I don't think he's now close enough to do that.
Well, Karl Wendlinger has been into the pits, the Austrian, and I suspect it's to retire. He wrenched his thumb very badly when he had a major off on Friday in qualifying. He didn't feel at all well this morning in the warm-up, and I suspect that Wendlinger's career with Sauber in Formula One is ending here today at Adelaide. But now we're on lap 11, and David Coulthard and Hill continue to battle for the lead. But if possibly Michael Schumacher in third position is carrying a heavier fuel load by virtue of the fact that he intends to stop less than the Williams team, we could see things transformed. Now, the earliest pit stop that we're expecting, assuming a three-stop strategy, would be around lap 18. It's lap 11 now. There are the leaders. Coulthard in front, Damon Hill behind, Williams, Renault, and Eddie Irvine is starting to come into the picture. He's in 8th position in the Jordan Peugeot, behind that battle for 6th position between Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Johnny Herbert.
Well, looking at the lap times, I would doubt that these cars are going to be on a three-stop strategy. I think the lap times are a bit too slow to actually do that. But you never know how the track conditions might have changed the situation, and by that we really mean track temperature. But at the moment it looks pretty clear that Hill and Coulthard are at least on the same strategy, and then Hill very nearly does what Alesi did. Well, in fact, it did the same thing. But interesting how the Williams looked a little bit more progressive in that situation than the Ferrari. But looks to me like Hill and Coulthard are on the same strategy. And frankly, I suspect that Schumacher is too, because Schumacher is just losing there. He was 9.2 seconds away from Hill. Now we can see it's 10.2. And he's slowly falling away from the Williams cars. And I think there could be two reasons for that. One, the fact that the Williams cars, frankly, have got the edge here at Adelaide. And the second one is that I suspect that even if they are on a two-stop strategy, Schumacher will be carrying a bit more fuel than the Williams cars. It's a typical thing that he's done this year to help overtaking by making a shorter stop.
David Coulthard is starting to lap competitors. That's Pedro Diniz that he's just gone past in the 40, which means Damon Hill has got to do the same thing. Gachot, of course, has long since been lapped. Pedro Diniz is 19th. Here is the Benetton, and ahead of Gachot is Michael Schumacher, third in the race, but now 12 seconds behind the quite magnificent first-timer David Coulthard. Well, Schumacher is now very much a seasoned campaigner. This is his 69th Grand Prix. Just one of them with Eddie Jordan's team in 1991 before he was snatched away by Tom Walkinshaw and Flavio Briatore, who were then the bosses at Benetton. Flavio Briatore still is. They saw Schumacher's potential as an ex-Mercedes-Benz top sports car driver and Formula 3 champion, contracted him to Benetton, and he has never looked back since. But he's got to look forward now. He's got to look forward about 13.5 seconds before he sees David Coulthard. And here is the leader soaring in and out. He's just past Roberto Moreno. He's up behind Taki Inui, the Japanese driver in the Arrow's Heart now, who is notoriously inexperienced at Formula One. It's his first season, and a lot of people think he's not really up to it. But David Coulthard gets past him. Let's hope Taki Inui doesn't turn in too soon, and he didn't. Damon Hill has now got to get past Moreno, the experienced Brazilian, who waves him past. Roberto sees Damon behind him, puts his hand up and says, pass on my left.
Well, that was a good move by Marino, but Damon really hasn't had much luck in the first of the traffic situations, and I think his teammates taken the best choice of that, gone straight through, and it really has cost Damon a couple of seconds.
Yeah, Damon has been accused of not being aggressive enough in traffic, unlike Michael Schumacher, who is extremely aggressive, and it's easy to criticise from outside the cockpit. The fact remains that David Coulthard has got past those two. Damon Hill took a little longer to do it, but he's back again with David Coulthard as they come down the Jones Straight, turn round Brewery Bend and go down the Jack Brabham Straight. Well, Damon Hill has made up that deficit. We're on lap 14 of the 81-lap Australian Grand Prix with the two Williams showing the way, the two Williams of David Coulthard and Damon Hill. And when I say showing the way, I mean that Coulthard is now 12.5 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher, who is nearly 10 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. But whilst it is settling down at the moment, there's no guarantee it's going to stay that way. It's a 1 3/4 hour long race. There are going to be tyre stops, refuelling stops. That's Pedro Lamy, the Portuguese driver, and he is about to be lapped by race leader David Coulthard. Lamy is 16th.
Now, one of the crucial things is, of course, how the leading drivers slice by the back markers. And to an extent, that depends on technique. To an extent, it does depend on good fortune of exactly where you encounter them. Clearly, if it's on a tight corner, you're going to get held up. If it's on a straight, you can breeze straight by. Well, we know that before that Damon Hill was 1.1 seconds behind David Coulthard. He's now 1.8. So simply negotiating the back markers has cost Damon Hill 0.7 of a second. Meanwhile, Schumacher continues to drop back. He's now 12.2 seconds away from Damon Hill. This is certainly looking very, very good for the Williams pairing, providing that they are on the same strategy. If the Williams duo are actually running less fuel than Schumacher, then it looks a lot closer.
Yeah, David Coulthard has just lapped Ukyo Katayama, who is in 15th place. Now we're with Damon Hill. There is the Tyrrell in front of us. Meantime, as Hill goes through, his teammate David Coulthard turns into the Adelaide hairpin, past this massed grandstand with tens of thousands of people. And it's a quite enormous crowd. Now we're into the S's, through them, approach at 170 miles an hour, exit at about 145 miles an hour. This is the right-hander of Wakefield Street, now into East Terrace. From East Terrace to the left-hander into Flinders Street. Now the right-hander at Hutt Street, on towards the Markets Turn, under the bridge. And this is the twisty part of the track.
Now, what's really interesting, too, is the fact that after negotiating that traffic, Michael Schumacher has actually closed up 2 seconds on Damon Hill, certainly over 1.5. Anyway, he's now just 10.6 seconds behind, Hill being 1.6, was 1.6 at the start-finish line, now 1.9 seconds on the split time, and that's what we're seeing.
And we're with Damon Hill now. That is David Coulthard ahead. This is the Adelaide hairpin. 1.9 seconds between them at the end of the 15th lap. This is at the end of the 16th lap. That is how close they are. Over the line goes Coulthard. Over the line goes Damon Hill. 1.3 seconds. Damon Hill has he's cut a third of David Coulthard's lead as Coulthard laps Nick Asalo, 14th in the Tyrrell. Damon Hill has now got to do the same thing, and he's done it. Damon Hill fastest in Adelaide, 1 minute 17.943, compared with his own lap record last year, 1 minute 15.4. He's gaining.
Now, the next 2 laps are going to be crucial, because if these Williams cars are going to make 3 stops, the first stop must surely come within the next couple of laps. They're on their 17th lap, and if they haven't stopped in the next 3, then they are going to be running 2 stops, and that relates, of course, to Michael Schumacher as well.
Let me just remind you, as you look at Taki Inoue of the Australian Grand Prix in the Arrows Heart quite safely. He spun out and he is still sitting in the car. That was at the Wakefield Street turn. The Japanese driver is out of the race, and that is the first retirement, actually. 23 cars started. Here's a replay.
Yes, he's just done that all wrong under brakes again. I keep harping back to this, but it looked like he had too much rear brakes. He's gone a little bit deep. He's hit those bumps. The back of the car's lost adhesion, and he's lost it up the escape road, fortunately without taking anybody else with him.
Well, let me just correct myself. For the sake of accuracy, he was the second retirement because Andrea Montemini, who replaced Oliver Gavin, the British Formula 3 champion, who had hoped to compete in his first Grand Prix at Adelaide, and Montemini is out. And there is activity in the pits.
Indeed, the Williams crew are getting ready for what is obviously the first of the refuelling stops. So, we know that the Williams cars are going to be coming in within the next lap. That means that it will be 3 stops to the Williams cars. The question is it Hill? Is it Coulthard? That we don't know. Now, this stop will cost them something like 22 seconds, I would think, and that's going to put Coulthard, if it's him or Hill, they're much the same, back out in front of Gerhard Berger. I suspect that will mean that they resume in then second or third place behind Michael Schumacher. The real question is, will Michael Schumacher come in?
Yes, is Michael Schumacher on a three-stop strategy, as we think the Williams drivers are? Is he on a two-stop strategy? If he's on a two-stop strategy, it could account for the fact that he's dropped back compared with them, because he would have started with a heavier fuel load. This race may not be quite what it seems as we wait for the first of the top men to come into the pit lane for the refueling and tire stop, and you watch Michael Schumacher, who is third, now 18.3 seconds behind David Coulthard, with Hill 2 seconds behind the leader. Berger is still fourth. Alesi, his teammate for Ferrari, is still fifth. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is still... No, he's not! That's Johnny Herbert going past Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who does the classic move at the Adelaide hairpin and repasses. That is Michael Schumacher, third on the grid and third in the race at the present moment, and we still wait now to see whether Damon Hill or Coulthard is coming in first.
There's the replay. We can see Herbert coming up the inside, but both brake rather too late, particularly Herbert, and that lets Frentzen come up the inside to resume his sixth place. But let's watch this pit stop, because when a Williams car comes in, if it's going to be a three-stopper, we're looking at an 8.5 second pit stop if there are no problems. So, Coulthard is out. It must be Hill coming in.
Coulthard goes through, still in the lead. That is Damon Hill, second. Now, is Michael Schumacher going to get through? Certainly he is, we think, to take second place as you watch the wheels replaced. And there is Michael Schumacher going through as Damon Hill blasts out of the pit lane. Schumacher is up to second place. Damon Hill is third because Berger has not gone through. In fact, there's a Ferrari into the pit lane as I talk to you, and it's Gerhard Berger. There he is. Gerhard Berger in from fifth position for his first pit stop. And you can see that there are brand new tyres that have gone on. A nice clean stop. Berger will be praying that his engine sensors are working properly. And in the Benetton pit there is activity. So either Johnny Herbert or Schumacher are coming in. We're on lap 20. Coulthard leads. Schumacher is second. Hill is third. Alesi is up into fourth place. Frentzen is up into fifth place. Herbert is up into sixth position. Berger is down to seventh place and into the pit lane. Oh, my goodness! David Coulthard smashes himself out of the Australian. I have never seen that before. He comes into the pit lane and into the wall and blows his chance of winning for Williams. What an absolute disaster for him.
Well, I can only think there that David got on what is undoubtedly a bit of the dusty area at the edge of the track and simply understeered off, just coming in the pit lane too fast. It's always been a question mark. When would we see somebody go off in the pit lane, bearing in mind it is recognised that this is a crucial part now to try and make up time and that the drivers just don't have the practice to do it. Let's have another look He comes up, he's in the pit lane. Let's see if there's any sign of anything breaking. He turns in. It looks, not to me, it looks for simply he tried to turn in too quickly on that tight corner on a dusty track.
Well, here's another view of it, Jonathan. He comes in. I think he's just going far too quick. He's got plenty of lock on, and the car's just not responding. He's just too quick. He gets on a little bit of loose stuff. He's on the brakes now, as you can see, but it's too late and into the wall. Now, I mean, that will be so embarrassing for him.
Well, embarrassing is one word, mortifying is another. A terrible way to finish his Williams career when he had victory potentially in his grasp. And now, guess who is leading the Australian Grand Prix? Number 1, Michael Schumacher, double world champion. He's ahead of Damon Hill. Don't forget, though, that Damon Hill has been in for his pit stop. Michael Schumacher has not. So we have the classic scenario unfolding before us again of Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill battling each other for victory in a Grand Prix, as they have done so many times in the past, notably here at Adelaide last year when they collided and took each other out of the race and out of the World Championship. My goodness.
And there is activity in the Benetton pit. Now, if this is for Michael Schumacher, then this looks very good for Damon Hill. Why? Because that means that Schumacher is running, certainly intending to do a three-stop strategy, and that means that their performances should be pretty similar in terms of fuel load. The alternative is for Johnny Herbert, and if that's the case, then Schumacher may well still be carrying on doing just 2 stops.
Well, if you watch Michael Schumacher, there is going to be an explanation from David Coulthard about what happened. He may well say, I ran a bit wide, I hit a dusty patch. The fact remains that he went off and into the wall when he was in the lead, and that for a Grand Prix driver in that situation, I have to say, is inexcusable. But Damon Hill, now the man with the experience, twice as many Grand Prix as David Coulthard, but less than Michael Schumacher, who is in his 69th Grand Prix, and Damon Hill is in his 50th. That's Barrichello going off. Rubens Barrichello. Well, he's only nudged the tyre wall. If he can back out, he's okay. But now here is Michael Schumacher, the race leader, lap 22, coming in for his pit stop. And he was only a few seconds ahead of Damon Hill, so the Englishman will surely take the lead in the Williams.
Well, that's an excellent sign as far as Damon Hill is concerned, because I would say now that they're on the same strategy, which means that Damon really has got about a 16, 18 second lead on Schumacher.
Yeah, Damon Hill is in the lead, and Alesi goes past. Sensational! John Alesi takes advantage of the fact that Michael Schumacher was coming out of the pit lane on semi-cold tyres and rockets up to second position. So, Damon Hill leads, Alesi is second, we're with Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Schumacher is down to third after his pit stop. Alesi, incidentally, will find his advantage short-lived because he has not yet come in, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen rejoins behind Pedro Diniz. So Frentzen is quite well down the field after his stop. Indeed, you can see Martin Brundle behind him. Frentzen is now 7th, and Martin Brundle is 8th. And as you watch that, Jonathan,
it's going to be really important for Michael Schumacher to try and get by Jean Alesi in the next couple of laps, and indeed he's just done it, and this... Wow, well, that was a very, very determined effort. Alesi's front wing's broken. Here's Michael Schumacher's car damaged. You've got 2 real hard tryers there.
Yeah, I want an incredible recall of 1994 as the parts fly off Alesi's car. He's coming in. Of course, he's got to have a new nose cone fitted. Now, the big question is Michael Schumacher's Benetton damaged? Has it bent one of the push rods?
Let's look at the replay of that, and Alesi really just carved straight into Michael Schumacher. That really was Alesi's fault. I don't know what he was thinking at the time, but Schumacher had the inside line there. And really, I think it didn't even look as if Alesi locked up the back wheels of the car to slew him in. He was trying to squeeze Schumacher, but to me, the moment was lost. Schumacher was through.
I can hesitate against what he was thinking. You're not going to get past me, you arrogant little crowd. That's what he was thinking under those circumstances.
Well, Michael Schumacher, of course, goes to Ferrari, and Jean Alesi takes Schumacher's place in the Benetton team next year. So there was a switch there. What does Barry Sheen know? He's in the Williams garage.
Yeah, I'm standing here with David Coulthard. David, what happened on the way into the pit?
Well, when I flicked it down into second gear, I braked normally for the corner, but then the idle strategy of the engine picked up and started to push me on when I was on the brake. And my was such a tight corner, it just locked up the front wheels and drove me into the wall, so very disappointing.
So that was it. You went for overrun, and it was just running, and the engine was still running and pushing you.
Yeah, we call it when it comes into the idle strategy, and sometimes it can be a little inconsistent. I just got a little bit too much at a critical time and ran out of road.
I feel for you.
Disappointing, but that's racing.
Thanks, Dave.
That's Pedro Lamy, who you've just seen spin out, but not stop. Kept his engine running. He was 13th, and he turns the spin. Well, he's making a real right porridge of this, a Portuguese porridge. Now, into the pits comes Michael Schumacher. His car is damaged. Michael Schumacher, this is his second stop. I remind you that he's collided with Jean Alesi, or rather Jean Alesi drove into him. They must suspect damage at the back of the car, perhaps the gearbox, and it could well be that Michael Schumacher's Australian Grand Prix is over, and taking with it his ambition to win his 10th Grand Prix in one season. Meantime, his teammate Johnny Herbert is up into second place. Irvine is third, Berger is fourth, Frentzen is fifth, Brundle is sixth, and Schumacher joins well down. And it looks to me as though they've decided that the car is all right. He's got a new set of tyres on. Alesi is back in the pits, having changed his nose cone, and retires. Jean Alesi retires from the Australian Grand Prix, and his last race for Ferrari. His 7th retirement of 1995, and I guess, frankly, he won't be... well, that is some endorsement of David Coulthard's problem, because there the 40 spins into the wall just as David did.
Well, I'm not sure that it's quite an endorsement of David Coulthard's problem. It sounded, from what David was saying, that literally the engine did not back off and it drove him forward. Effectively, he still had some accelerator pushing him forward when he wanted to stop. Now, if that was the case, then that would certainly explain that situation. There may or may not have been an element of actually coming in a little bit too quickly anyway to that. But what we saw then with the 40 spinning does indicate that that pit lane is very slippery, and that the dust on the outside, Eddie Irvine completes his pit stop, the dust on the outside is catching people out at a time when they are trying to go quickly. They know there is time coming in and going out of the pit lane.
So now let's take a deep breath and review the situation. Damon Hill leads the Australian Grand Prix on lap 26 by 32 seconds from Johnny Herbert. But Damon Hill has stopped once and Johnny Herbert has not. Gerhard Berger is third, 9 seconds behind Herbert. Berger has stopped, Herbert has not. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is fourth and has also stopped. Martin Brundle is up into fifth position in the Ligier, and the man you are watching, Eddie Irvine in the Jordan Peugeot, is in sixth place. The man who spun the 40, incidentally, into the pit wall was veteran Roberto Moreno. Michael Schumacher has rejoined after his second pit stop. He is in seventh place, but he's now 70 seconds behind race leader Damon Hill. Whoa, what a race of incidents. Mark Blundell is in 8th position in the McLaren Mercedes. Gianni Morbidelli, an excellent 9th in the Arrows Heart. And Olivier Parnis, the Frenchman in the Ligier Mugen Honda, is making up the top 10 positions. And everybody already up to Gianni Morbidelli has been lapped by the man you're watching now, Damon Hill. Is this going to be Damon Hill's Australian Grand Prix win, the one he tried so hard for last year? I'm sure that his pit will have said to him, watch the entry, because David Coulthard went off. Schumacher into the pits for the third time. Is this a retirement now? Again, they suspect a problem at the back of the car. It could be gearbox, it could be a wheel bearing, because wheel bearings have a tremendous loading on them, and that's where Alesi hit the Benetton.
Yes, this really is not going to endear Jean Alesi to the Benetton team, where he's going to be going next year, because that was a very sad mistake from Alesi at that point. He's been a very frustrated man this weekend. He said to me before the race that he was only going to be too pleased to finish his last race. The engine stops on the Benetton. I think Michael Schumacher is effectively retired. Yes, he's climbing out of the car. Now, this is really handing the race to Damon Hill. Damon is now 34 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert. He's really got this race in the bag. Providing that the Williams stays reliable, Damon can almost relatively cruise around now, because Herbert is in second place, Berger is in third place, and those two, neither of those two, can lap within a second or two of Damon. So this really is a race that's changed its face so dramatically within just the first third.
And how very, very unusual it is to see a Benetton with Michael Schumacher in it being wheeled out of the race, because the Benetton and the Renault engine and Michael Schumacher are normally tremendously reliable.
So with Damon Hill, race leader into the S's, past the McLaren of Mark Blundell, who is in 6th position. So Damon Hill with Michael Schumacher now out of the Australian Grand Prix, the first retirement for a mechanical problem, albeit caused by something that was not his fault. Lap 29 out of 81, and what Damon Hill has got to do now is stay cool, keep control of his emotions, keep the line clean, watch the car, watch how he passes people, and pray for reliability, because he is 33 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert, who is quite clearly on a two-stop strategy, because he has yet to come in, and we're on lap 29, and he's leaving it moderately late even for that, I would have said. But anyway, Herbert is 33 seconds behind Damon Hill, the race leader, who is looking good, I will say no more than that, for his 13th Grand Prix victory. With Herbert second, Gerhard Berger is 11 seconds behind the sole remaining Benetton in the Australian Grand Prix. Heinz-Harald Frentzen stands a very good chance of getting onto the podium again in the Sauber Ford, as he did in the Italian Grand Prix, because he's in 4th place behind Gerhard Berger and ahead of Eddie Irvine's Jordan, which is 5th, as Damon Hill comes through Brewery Bend down the fast straight, closing up on the Tyrrell in front of him, goes past. That's Renault Power versus Yamaha. Now this is a replay of Michael Schumacher, and that is Jean Alesi in front of us. So let's see what happened from Schumacher's point of view. Watch the Ferrari, that's bits coming off the front wing.
Yes, this is of course after the actual incident. This is as Alesi makes his way back towards the pits and the front wing remnants disintegrate and come back up into the face of Michael Schumacher.
There is Damon Hill, completing his 30th lap into lap 31 now. So he's not even half distance yet. There's a lot that can still happen in this Australian Grand Prix, because we know that an hour and 45 minutes in this heat and carving through the traffic can cause all sorts of problems, even when you're over half a minute ahead, as Damon Hill is.
Well, quite correctly, Murray. This is when you start hearing little noises that don't exist, and you're really trying to keep your concentration, because sometimes, oh, look, he's coming in too quick. Johnny Herbert, same problem.
Johnny Herbert, is he doing the same thing as David Coulthard? He just managed to get back onto the track.
He was able to turn left. He had full intentions, I think, of coming into the pits. He's obviously locked everything up, but very quick reflexes. He's turned it left and gone over the curve and joined the circuit. Well done.
Well, of course, the next question is, does Johnny Herbert have enough fuel left to get round the next lap? Because the teams do keep these things pretty critical. I suspect the answer's yes. Let's have a look. He looks to go in the pit lane, judges it, thinks he's going too quickly, gets on the curb on the outside. It's obviously slippery. It is the dust here. The drivers have been commenting on the dust throughout the practice sessions and how easy it is to spin it when they're on the racing line. Look, he has a look. He tries to go to the pit lane, but frankly, he goes in even too fast to start with. Now, what's interesting is, of course, that we have seen this is the third person that's done this now. And but of course, the Johnny Herbert, he doesn't know that what's happened to David Coulthard or indeed Roberto Moreno. These drivers are finding this out for the first time, and if I was a team manager, I'd be radioing to my drivers to say, look, there have been a lot of incidents, people are coming in too fast, it's dangerous.
News from Barry Sheene in the pit lane.
Yeah, I've just spoken to Schumacher, Murray, and they brought him in first of all because the car felt strange after the ding with the Lacey, and then he came in because it felt really strange, and they've had a look at it. It was a bent rear wishbone.
Yeah, I suspected something like that. It's only Schumacher's 5th retirement, and now Johnny Herbert makes a successful pass into the pit lane. His fuel has held out, and he's now going to drop even further back, and Gerhard Berger, as Johnny Herbert stops, goes through into second position, 48 seconds behind Damon Hill.
In case you wonder what that cloud of black dust was from the left front wheel, that's brake, carbon fibre brake dust. That's quite normal. But I must say, hats off to Johnny Herbert there for actually doing the right thing in mitigating that problem. He could have easily ended up as being another spinner and touched the wall once again into retirement.
I think what caused that more than anything was, A, he came in too quick, but he also left his entry too late. He actually turned in at the last minute.
Lap 32, we're still not even up to half distance in this race. All the first 5 have now stopped once, and the first 5 are Damon Hill, who is 48 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. They both stopped once. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is up to an excellent third, underlining his ability not just on any kind of circuit, but a street circuit in particular. That's Gerhard Berger, who is in second place. Johnny Herbert is 4th, and that's despite his pass to get into the pits, which failed, and then his pit stop. Eddie Irvine is in 5th place, and Mark Blundell, although he's been lapped in the McLaren Mercedes, and this is his last race for the team, we think, because he was due to move on somewhere, but we don't know how well Mika Hakkinen is going to be, and it may well be that Mark Blundell will get another chance with McLaren. But anyway, whatever, he's in the points. He's in 6th place ahead of Olivier Parnitz. Gianni Morbidelli is 8th. Mika Salo is 9th in the Tyrrell. Ukyo Katayama is 10th in the other Tyrrell. 11th is Pedro Lamy, and in 12th place is Pedro Diniz. There's Frentzen. And what a super driver this young man is. He lost a lot of time in terms of getting into Formula One by deciding when he was with the German Mercedes-Benz sports car team that he would move to Formula 3000, and he spent several years in Japan before he got his opportunity with Sauber last year, and he's grasped it with both hands, and there were even rumours that the Williams team were trying to get him.
Frentzen was even reckoned by Peter Sauber, who ran the Mercedes sports car team when Schumacher was his teammate, to be actually at least as quick, if not quicker, than Schumacher, although without quite the temperament. But this here today could be Heinz-Harald Frentzen's potential to get best result yet. He's 3rd at the moment, Berger is ahead, but the Ferrari reliability record is diabolical, quite frankly, and I suspect we're going to see Frentzen do better in those stakes.
Have a look at the cockpit of Frentzen Sauber while you're doing it now. Sauber were the first people last year, after Karl Wendlinger went off in practice for Monaco and had head injuries, to build up the side of the car. And since then, the FIA, the governing body, have made it mandatory for special padding to go behind the driver's head. On his way, and this is his 31st Grand Prix. He's in 3rd position. He's had one 3rd place already this season, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. McLaren are ready in the pit lane as you watch Damon Hill leading Gerhard Berger by 49 seconds.
And that is the reason that Mark Blundell is in 6th place. That is because he's the only one not to have stopped. Blundell comes into the pit. It's going to be a long, well, it may be, actually, it'll be a short stop, I feel, because I think the McLaren took a leaf out of the Ferrari book from last year when Berger was 2nd after making a very late stop. In fact, on this very same lap, lap 34. Yep, relatively short stop there. That does mean, and let's have a look here, that is Blundell coming in through the chicane there, followed by Olivier Panis in the Ligier. And Lepanis comes through. Blundell looks like he gets it rather out of shape. We're going out of our picture. Well, I'm not quite sure what the story was there, but it looked as if we may have been about to see Blundell go off the road. But clearly nothing awry there. But that means that from the length of that pit stop, it wasn't long enough to be his only pit stop, so we're going to see Blundell come in again. So 2 stops there for McLaren. The first stop, very late indeed.
And Mark Blundell, that you're watching now, having made his pit stop, is a lap down. He is in 8th position. He was passed by Gianni Morbidelli. There looked like an off in the background to me. It's Gerhard Berger Gerhard Berger out, and look at the smoke coming from the side pod. He must have blown an engine. He did that yesterday in the biggest possible way. And, well, Michael Schumacher's out of this race. He'll be hoping that the V10 engine that Ferrari are going to be using next year is showing better reliability than the V12 here in Adelaide this year. And Ferrari are a long, long way from getting on top of their problems to create a consistently race-winning car. Gerhard Berger out of the Australian Grand Prix with what looks like a blown engine from that steam issuing and smoke coming out of the side pods. That's the second engine in 2 days, and look at that replay.
Well, the other thing now, of course, Murray, is we're hoping that he's not going to leave oil, because that's going into a very dicey corner. It's actually quite a quick entry into there with a adverse camber. So the next person along would be very, very careful.
Well, there are only 3 cars on the lead lap now. This is lap 37 out of 81. Once again, the Australian Grand Prix at Adelaide, sadly, the last one we'll be seeing on this magnificent circuit, is proving to be a car breaker and a driver tester. Because, I say again, we are not yet even on the half-distance lap, which is lap 40 in this lap 40 and a half, to be absolutely pedantically correct. It's an 81 lap race, and Damon Hill is on lap 37 as Frentzen comes up to Mark Blundell. That's the McLaren ahead. We're riding with Frentzen now.
And that's Frentzen coming up to lap Mark Blundell, and it's going to be very important that he will know not to try anything rash, because he's looking in a pretty comfortable position. Johnny Herbert is the one that's going to pressurise him, and he's right behind him there now. We've also got Damon Hill leading by 1 minute 3 seconds, but Hill will have to make another pit stop within the next 3 laps. Now that's still going to put him back well ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen there, but certainly the real battle at the moment, and it may well go on to the end of the race, because both these cars are reliable. Frentzen in the Sauber, Herbert right behind in the Benetton.
They are fighting for second place now that Gerhard Berger has retired. Both the Ferraris out. Schumacher's Benetton is out. David Coulthard's Williams is out. There is decimation in the field, to put it very mildly. And Damon Hill in the sole Williams lead. Mark Blundell, who is a lap behind Frentzen. We're with Mark Blundell now, looking at him as he goes through the bend, down the fastest part of the course. Now we're with Frentzen, and that is Mark Blundell ahead. Don't forget that right behind Frentzen, who is in second place in the Sauber, going for his best finish yet as Mark Blundell turns in and chops him off. Well, what do you think of that, Alan?
Well, Johnny Herbert took advantage of that. What happened was that Blundell cut across his bows. Frentzen had to jump on the brakes a lot harder than what he would normally. Johnny Herbert was there ready to take advantage of it. Nearly did so, but didn't quite have the momentum that I thought he was going to get him. But Blundell really should, in this instance, I think, move over, because he's really not in the race for second and shouldn't be holding these guys up like this.
I would agree with that too, because Blundell is some 37 seconds ahead of Miko Sola behind. Let's have a look. We're with Frentzen there. On the left-hand side is Blundell. Frentzen's done enough to get through, frankly. Blundell is being lapped, but Blundell closes the door right to the apex. Frentzen loses all of his speed. On his right now is going to be the Benetton of Herbert, but Frentzen keeps going. Now he's going to... The problem again for Frentzen is that he does not have the straight line speed to match the Mercedes engine McLaren. He's going to need to get right with Blundell as they come around towards Upstad corner, coming up next, and then the final point. This is where Frentzen needs to be getting right into the toe of that McLaren. Up now towards Brewery, and then we have the long straight. He needs him to be right on the toe. He's well placed. Right on the power, Heinz-Harald. That's where you need to be. Now, he's going to be pulling up. Let's look for the McLaren to gradually loom greater in the front of the camera. Well, you can see how slowly it's happening. That's because he just doesn't have the straight line speed advantage. But he does go by on the brakes. Will he keep ahead? Can he maintain it? He does. And Herbert goes through too.
Yeah, Mark Blundell, I think, decided that he would let Johnny Herbert through. Mark had been adopting the historical Maginot Line policy from World War II. They shall not pass. But they have passed, both of them. Frentzen and Herbert. Now a clear track in front of them. You can see them ahead. They're a lap ahead of Mark Blundell, who is in 7th position. Here they come. Damon Hill is now 72 seconds ahead. That's a replay of a that is not very polite, Heinz Harold.
Not only is it not very polite, but it's also difficult turning to a right-hand corner with your left-hand hand up, I would imagine.
Absolutely. He was pretty incensed there, and with good reason too.
There'll be a discussion between the very gritty Mark Blundell and the very determined Frenson afterwards.
Of course, it's sad that actually it's with the Sauber team, because one of the drives that Mark Blundell is trying to get for next year is with Sauber, and that would not have endeared him to Frenson at all.
Well, let's go through the retirements now. There have been several of them and some very important ones. Montemini is out from after a 7th lap. Carl Wendlinger retired, I suspect, because he didn't feel well. Taki Inouye drove into the wall. David Coulthard did the same thing in the pit lane. Rubens Barrichello has retired. And Martin Brundle is also out of the race, as of course are Roberto Moreno, Jean Alesi, Michael Schumacher and Gerhard Berger. In fact, there are only 12 runners out of the 23 who started, and we are only now on the half-distance lap. Into the pit lane for the second time comes race leader Damon Hill, who can not only change all 4 tyres and wheels, he can change his engine, gearbox, steering wheel and everything else he's got with the lead that he has. Let's just take a look. Well, 8.7 seconds, but they had all the time in the world.
Exactly. I mean, when it really doesn't count, they do one of their best stops.
Don't be like that, Alan. Damon Hill leads in Australia. Lap 41, 81 lap race. Well, you can draw your own conclusions. I'm not going to say it because I've said it so many times in the past, only for bad luck to strike.
Yes, it's going to be an extraordinary situation now for Damon Hill inside that Williams, because he's going to know that he's just so far ahead. And how fast does he go? He could back off, frankly, by at least a second a lap and still be able to win this race quite comfortably. But the important thing is to keep up the rhythm, and I suspect he will literally be running about a second and a half of absolutely flat-out pace. He doesn't want to overstress the car. He'll maybe using a few hundred revs less, but he thinks that these engines are incredibly highly stressed, and that looks like Frenson pulling off. It is indeed.
Well, Heinz Harold Frenson from second position out of the race, and Johnny Herbert will now be saying to himself, I could win this race. I could not only win in Britain and win in Italy, I could win in Australia. And I haven't said yet, but there is a battle for third place in the Drivers' Championship between David Coulthard, Johnny Herbert or Jean Alesi, or at least there was when the race began. But with David Coulthard out and with Jean Alesi out, if Johnny Herbert finishes this race, he's going to be third in the Drivers' Championship. And there's the man who's second and can't be beaten to second place, but equally cannot take first because Michael Schumacher has already won it. It's Damon Hill on his 42nd lap. Now, let's hear from the experts. Let's hear from the drivers. You're leading by a minute from Johnny Herbert, Alan Jones and Jonathan Palmer. What are you going to do now? You are Damon Hill.
Well, you're going to try like Villiers not to lose your concentration. You're going to be able to drive as cleanly as you can. You're going to look after the revs. I mean, in many instances, if you haven't got somebody to get away from or somebody to catch, this might sound ridiculous, but it can almost get boring and you can actually lose your concentration. So you really must concentrate on braking correctly and doing the right gear changes at the right time and just, quite frankly, bringing it home.
Yes, it's been a marvellous weekend for Damon Hill so far, and I feel that he's going to actually believe he's deserved it, quite frankly. He's had a rough time of it recently. He's made mistakes. We know that. He's being criticised. He's being criticised by me. But this weekend, he really has done everything absolutely right at a time that he really needed to. He got the car on pole position. He got away well at the start. He gave Coulthard room. Eddie Irvine comes in for his second stop. He gave Coulthard room. He carried on. He hustled. He set fastest laps. And now he's the one who's out there. He's the one that didn't hit the pit wall. He didn't get involved with the tangle with anybody else. And he needs to keep running along now, maintain the rhythm, and just hope that the Williams maintains its reliability throughout the race to score what will almost certainly be a very, very rich reward for him. And that's just the kind of result that he would need to go into the winter layoff with a degree of confidence that he hasn't had of late to make sure that he's in the best shape for next year.
You're watching Eddie Irvine, third place, but
a lap down. Quite incredible. Halfway through the race, there are only 2 drivers on the same lap. They are Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert. Less than a minute between them now. Johnny Herbert took about 3 seconds out of Damon Hill's lead, but it was because Damon was coming in to take his second pit stop, and Johnny Herbert has yet to do that. We think that Hill is, well, we're sure Hill is on a 3-stop strategy. I'm sure that Johnny Herbert is on a 2-stop strategy. But Damon Hill is now lapping faster than Herbert's Benetton. Eddie Irvine, that you are watching, is a lap down in 3rd position. Olivier Parnis is 4th. Gianni Morbidelli is 5th. Mark Blundell is 6th. Then we come to Salo, who's already been lapped twice, and he's in 7th place ahead of Pedro Lamy. With Ukyo Katayama in the second Tyrrell, they're going well and proving to be reliable. Also 2 laps down in 9th position. Pedro Diniz must be thinking that all his Christmases are coming together, because although he's 3 laps down in the 40 Ford, the reliable usually 40 Ford, but very slow, he's in 10th position. And he is the last runner. There are only 10 cars left in this race.
Damon Hill has come off the pace quite considerably, and quite wisely so. I mean, he's really now coming back to a comfortable pace and saving all the equipment, and quite frankly, even coming off the pace as far as he's concerned, he's still on the pace regards the other runners.
Yes, prior to that retirement from Frentzen, I was going to go on to say that the engines on these cars are incredibly highly stressed. The Renault V10 inside Damon's Williams there will be revving to some 16,000 revs at its peak. And if Damon can just bring that back to maybe 15,500, it'll make a significant difference to the demands, the stresses on that engine, whilst perhaps knocking off 2 or 3 tenths, maybe half a second from his lap time, a deficit that he can clearly afford at the moment.
Well, Olivier Parnis, who is under threat in the Ligier team, is now in 4th place. Lap 44, here are the positions. Hill, you're watching him. Herbert, 2nd. Williams Renault leads. Benetton Renault 2nd. Eddie Irvine is in 3rd position. Now, in the Jordan, now Eddie has actually had 1 3rd position in his career before. That was this year's Canadian Grand Prix. He would love to finish on the podium again. It's his last race for Jordan before he joins Ferrari, although it looks as though he's joining a more reliable team in terms of car finishes than the one he might be going to next year. Olivier Parnis, a lap down in the Ligier, is going extremely well. His best performance so far this year is a couple of 4th places in Canada and Belgium, and that's where he is now. But Gianni Morbidelli, like Pedro Diniz, must be praying for a finish, because his Arrows team have only scored 1 World Championship point this year. They're way down in 8th position. Gianni Morbidelli himself scored that point. He got it in the Canadian Grand Prix, and he's now in 5th place. And Mark Blundell is back in 6th position in the McLaren Mercedes, ahead of Mika Salo, and we're on lap 45. So, Damon Hill, well, let's look at Hill's record. 3 wins. He started off the season magnificently by leading the Brazilian Grand Prix until his suspension collapsed and he was convincingly holding Michael Schumacher back. Then Damon had a superb win in Argentina, another one, a most emotional victory at Imola, the San Marino Grand Prix, on the anniversary of the awful death of his team leader the previous year, Ayrton Senna. And then Damon had another superb victory, one that he described as his best yet, and he's won 12 times in Hungary. He's had 3 second places, but he's also had that problem of driving into Michael Schumacher at Silverstone in the British Grand Prix, driving into Michael Schumacher at Monza in the Italian Grand Prix, going off at Suzuka, as did his teammate David Coulthard. And it was as a result of that he had a lot of criticism from the media, and he's just done his best to ignore it. He said he knows the media have got a job and they look for sensation, and he read the papers for a long time and then decided he was just going to stay clear of them, which is what Nelson Piquet always used to do. He was never worried if anybody said something unpleasant about him because he never knew. And Eddie Irvine there, a lap down, third position, the Irishman who has made his way up through most of the categories in racing, because he started off in Formula Ford. He's a double champion in Formula Ford, in fact, and he won the Formula Ford Festival in 1987 before going up to Formula Ford 2000, where he was the British and European champion. So then Irvine elevated it. Eddie Irvine then elevated himself to Formula 3000. He had a win at Hockenheim and went to Japan, where he was extremely successful, made a great deal of money. In fact, he made so much money that Formula 1 wasn't even particularly attractive to him until he had the offer to drive for Jordan. And then we had that incredibly memorable situation where he passed Ayrton Senna in the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, incurred the great Brazilian's wrath, as a result of which there was literally a punch-up in the Jordan garage after the race. Eddie Jordan had made his name. He did it again in Brazil by having a coming together the next year with Jos Verstappen and Martin Brundle and Eric Comas. But now he's very well attuned to Grand Prix racing.
Well, I think the Jordan team are going to be disappointed to see Eddie Irvine some 42 seconds behind Johnny Herbert there. I think they see themselves as being very much, and quite rightly so too, I have to say, very much on par with Johnny Herbert in a Benetton. But Irvine's going to definitely have to raise his game in all sorts of areas. He's got a tremendous opportunity next year, his teammate at Ferrari, no less, to Michael Schumacher. It's a pretty invidious position, and many a teammate has come a cropper by trying to cope with Michael Schumacher's speed and psychological dominance. But Irvine is probably reasonably well equipped to do that, and you may well wonder why. What has a bit of a slide there from Damon Hill. You may well wonder why. What has Irvine done to deserve that break? And I think what has impressed is the fact that he's out-qualified his teammate Rubens Barrichello, who himself is very highly rated, certainly a couple of years ago, although he's gone off slightly. And to out-qualify Barrichello so dominantly has shown great speed, and that's impressed Ferrari. And if he can actually develop his setting up into a more methodical approach, we could yet see Irvine develop into a truly front-running driver.
I think Eddie Irvine's got a great philosophy going to Ferrari. He simply said, look, everybody reckons that Schumacher's a genius. So if I go there and come second to him, they'll say, well, what do you expect? He's a genius, and Eddie Irvine's in the second car anyway. But if I can take the gloves to him a couple of times during the year, they'll think I'm pretty good for having beaten the genius. So he's got a good Irish philosophy to it.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think there are very few drivers who've got that degree of confidence and that degree of blasé kind of attitude to cope with that situation.
You're watching race leader Damon Hill, lap 49 out of 81, with a commanding lead of 62 seconds over Johnny Herbert in the Benetton, who is the only other competitor on the same lap as Damon Hill. And Damon is at least closing the championship gap, as he also closes up on 6th place Mark Blundell to lap him a second time. That's an indication of how quickly Damon is going in comparison with everybody else. And
it's amazing just how car braking and generally damaging these street circuits are. We've seen a very high attrition rate. We're only just over the halfway point, but still the number of front runners that have been eliminated is high. The reasons for that are, to start with, in terms of, let's just hope here, watching Damon Hill, that he manages to get by Mark Blundell without the kind of problems that Frentzen encountered. I'm sure he will. I'm sure Blundell will possibly wait until the main straight. Certainly Damon does not need to make any effort to get by Blundell and lap him in a hurry, and Blundell may well know that too. One of the problems of going offline to let somebody else go by is that you can get on the dust, and we've seen what the dust has done all too often, and that can mean that you've got a big chance, A, of actually going off and hitting something, or B, just losing a lot of time, and that is not something which Blundell will want to do. And I would expect to see them keep to their line when it comes to the main straight. Damon will simply blow by the McLaren. He's right up in the toe there, but he doesn't even need to do that because he's got this 5 miles an hour speed advantage, certainly 3 or 4. Just look, watch the way he just drives by down the straight, and that makes the job so much easier. Now compare that to the way that Frentzen had to work.
Damon Hill has now lapped Mark Blundell, that we're riding with, for the second time, and Mark Blundell is in 6th position, having already finished in the points in Italy this year. He was in 4th place, and he's had 3 5th positions as well as the 6th place. So if Mark brings the McLaren Mercedes home in the points, he will have a great deal to feel very proud about and to underline his claim for a Formula One seat next year with Sauber, with Tyrrell, or maybe even with his previous team, Ligier. And just going back to our point about just why is the attrition rate so high here, it comes because A, on street circuits there is much less margin for error. You can see how close the concrete walls are. The dust is around on the circuits because they're not regular race circuits. It's easier to go off, and we've seen that happen. It's also easier to have engine problems in some ways because the amount of slow corners means a lot of gearbox work up and down through the gears, a lot of gear changing, and that stresses the engine in many ways more than just fast flowing circuits. And then the temperature's high. Temperatures here have been high at Adelaide. All of those things together, plus a bit of bad luck, means that we got this very extraordinary race.
Well, I think history backs you up on that, Jonathan, because in 85 and 89 there was actually only 8 finishes in those 2 years. So Adelaide does have its share of attrition.
Jonathan, Allen, suppose you were David Coulthard. You've gone off at Suzuka in the Japanese Grand Prix. You've gone off at Adelaide in the next Grand Prix in Australia. What do you think would be your mental attitude?
Well, of course, he went off in the warm-up lap at Monza as well, which was a bit unnecessary for a driver of that level. But definitely you would be taking yourself behind the garages and giving yourself a little bit of a talking to, I think, and not least of which I think Frank would be having a little bit of a talk to him. But he'll know exactly what he did, and he'll be his own worst critic.
Yes, I would suspect that whilst there was certainly a problem with the idle of that car, that there may have been a part of it. Again, we're looking at Damon Hill coping with these back markers very carefully. A part of it that David just simply went a bit too quickly into that corner, and he has made quite a few mistakes again. But then on his side, he knows he's young, he's experienced. It won't be much solace to him, but I'm quite sure that we're going to see Coulthard at the front of Grand Prix racing for a good 5, possibly 10 years to come yet. And this memory, which will be exceedingly painful tonight, he's going to be lying in bed, probably not sleeping, ruing over what might have been tremendous frustration. In a few years' time, even probably in a few months, it'll be a memory.
Damon Hill goes past Ukko Katayama in the Tyrrell, and that's the 3rd time. Katayama is now 3 laps behind. Effectively, he's the last driver in this race. I know there are 2 behind him. Pedro Diniz is behind him in 10th place. Bertrand Gachot is behind him in 11th place. But effectively, we can discount the 40 and the Pacific car, unfortunately, because they're such a long way behind. And Damon Hill is on his 52nd lap. We're seeing an enormous amount of the Williams, and rightly so. He's absolutely dominated the proceedings here at Adelaide. Fastest on Friday in qualifying, fastest on Saturday in qualifying, fastest this morning in the warm-up. He is leading the race by 65 seconds, and he's made the fastest lap of the race on lap 16, 1 minute 17.943, and that is 2.1 seconds slower than his own lap record last year with a bigger engine and greater downforce, and he certainly won't be breaking it now because he has absolutely no need to hurry and every reason to take things very carefully indeed. As you look at Johnny Herbert, 65 seconds behind the Williams, on track for his 2nd place, the second place he will have had this year if he finishes there, because he was 2nd in Spain.
And we saw on the graphic there that on the last lap, Johnny Irvine was in fact 2 seconds quicker on a 1 minute 20 than Hill's 1 minute 22. But don't be fooled by that. We also saw Hill being held up behind the Tyrrell of Katayama before he got by. So that was a purely traffic-induced gap. And Hill has been stroking it round relatively in the 1 minute 19, 1 minute 20. It's Herbert is the one who's got a charge, and he's putting in a good effort at the moment, I must say.
Well, here's a question for the anoraks who are watching. When was the last time that British drivers finished 1st, 2nd and 3rd in a Grand Prix? And that's your starter for 10. The next question is, when was the last time that 4 British drivers finished in the top 6? That's the situation at the moment. Admittedly, we're only on lap 54 out of 81, and things could change. But that's the 3rd British driver in the top 3, Eddie Irvine, who comes from Conleague in County Down, notwithstanding the fact that he actually lives in Dublin at the moment and is threatening to take a flat in Maranello next year when he drives for Ferrari. Johnny Herbert is 2nd for Benetton and Britain, and Damon Hill leads for Williams and Britain, and Mark Blundell is 6th for McLaren and Britain. And please don't send your answers to me.
Well, I really hope you're right, Marion, that we do get 3 British drivers in the top 3. It would indeed be tremendous. Now, the biggest threat, I think, to that must come from Eddie Irvine, because this year the Peugeot engine in particular has hardly been the paragon of reliability, and the chances of the car finishing are about 50-50 on past results. But the most extraordinary reliability record has in fact come from Johnny Herbert this year, and that the Benetton of Herbert has never yet broken down. Let's hope that that tremendous record doesn't start here, and if Johnny does indeed get through this race, it'll mean that he's gone through the entire season with the car never ever having let him down.
Well, as you watch the Ligier, believe it or not, I actually have the answer to the question that I have just asked. We think that the last time that 3 British drivers finished 1st, 2nd and 3rd in a Formula 1 Grand Prix race was at Silverstone 30 years ago, 1965. Jim Clark won. Raymond Hill, the father of Damon Hill, who is leading the race, was 2nd, and John Surtees was in 3rd place. Thank you, Mike Dudson.
Well, we're going to get some more pit action next, I think, because we're approaching the 2/3 distance, and within the next 2 laps, I'd expect to see those on a 2-stop strategy stopping. That will be Johnny Herbert, Olivier Panis, Morbidelli, and Mark Blundell. All of those, and as I look out of my commentary box window, I can indeed see the Benetton crew getting ready. There is movement going on. This must be the stop for Herbert.
It is the stop for Herbert. We're riding with him. Just watch him roll up to the jack.
Another brand new set of tyres going on there. You can just see the telltale signs of the mould mark around the outside. Nice stop there. 12 seconds. That's roundabout right for a 2-stop strategy. They would have put in some 75 litres of fuel into that Benetton, flowing at the rate of 9 litres a minute. Got to be a little bit careful on the opening couple of corners, because whilst the tyres are hot, they're still not quite as grippy as they will be once the very, very outer sheen has worn off. But Mark Blundell out, this time behind Johnny Herbert, so Herbert now with a clear bit of track in front of him.
Yeah, but going very carefully round the left-hander. He's just been round because he spun off yesterday, and Damon Hill has now lapped everybody. Damon Hill is the only person on lap 56, so the race is certainly looking good for Damon, and if he wins it, it will be his 13th Grand Prix victory. As Johnny Herbert accelerates away, he's got Mark Blundell behind him, but there is a lap difference, and on lap 56, with still a long, long, long way to go, Damon Hill leads Johnny Herbert by a lap. Johnny Herbert is 27 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine. They've both stopped twice, so there's a potential battle developing for 2nd place. Olivier Panis in the Ligier is in 4th position on the same lap as Herbert, Irvine and Panis, and 12 seconds behind Eddie Irvine Jordan. Gianni Morbidelli, however, in 5th place in the Arrow's Heart with its V8 engine, is 2 laps behind the leaders. Mark Blundell was in 6th position, because there has been a change as I talk to you, and Damon Hill is still leading, and the order is Hill, Herbert, Irvine, Panis, Blundell in 5th position, and Gianni Morbidelli in 6th place. So it's a question of can they go the distance, and particularly can Damon Hill go the distance. And if Damon can, his victory would be enormously well deserved. He would go into the winter of 1995 knowing that he'd got continuity with his team, unlike Johnny Herbert, who won't have, unlike Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, David Coulthard, Michael Schumacher, who won't have because they're going to new teams, and Damon Hill, who will be driving next year with Gilles Villeneuve, will be patiently developing with Jacques Villeneuve. I do apologise, with Jacques Villeneuve, will be patiently developing next year's car.
That's a very good point indeed, Murray. The continuity and the rapport that a driver builds up with his team is immensely important, and it will take those other guys that are moving to new teams 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes even half a season to build up a good, reliable rapport with their engineer and team owner. Damon, on the other hand, is just going to go into the winter and he'll be going back into the same familiar cockpit, talking to the same familiar engineers and people, and that is a big advantage for a driver.
With one exception, Alan, and that is that his race engineer, David Brown, who has engineered for Alain Prost, Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna, has been persuaded to leave the Williams team and join McLaren to look after David Coulthard. Now a lap 58 now, Hill's on his 58th lap, and it's about time for Hill's third and final pit stop. The Williams pit crew are ready, waiting in front of us, and this is going to be, as ever, a little bit of a risky time. There's not a great deal of risk with stopping, but nevertheless, it's probably the greatest threat at the moment to Hill having any kind of a problem as he completes the last few laps of this race now. And I have no doubt that they will be saying to him, and for heaven's sake, Damon, take it easy coming off the track and into the pit lane. Because we've seen what happened to David Coulthard, we've seen what happened to Roberto Moreno, we've seen what happened to Johnny Herbert, who all had trouble trying to get into the pit lane off the track, and that would be the very last thing on earth that Damon Hill, now on his 59th lap, would want.
So Hill continuing round, and it must surely be at the end of this lap that he'll come into the pits. There's an interesting thing about these cars. We saw that incident. Mark Blundell comes in for his stop there. And this is going to be a relatively short stop, I would think, again, because he had that very long one to start with. Let's have a look, see what's going on there. Well, that's 10 seconds. Yep, that's not a bad stop at all. And the next one we expect to come up into the pit lane will be Damon Hill as he completes this lap, his 59th lap.
Out goes Mark Blundell. Behind him, Eddie Irvine is coming up to lap him. Mark Blundell on new tyres, of course, not quite up to race temperature. Eddie Irvine takes the opportunity. Oh! Well, Mark Blundell is certainly not being very helpful, Alan, in this race, is he?
No, he's certainly not. I mean, he's out of the pits on brand new tyres. They certainly wouldn't be up to normal working temperature. Eddie Irvine was coming up under normal circumstances. I would have thought that Mark would have just let him go through.
Well, I don't know, because these two are potentially racing. They're obviously distanced by some way at the moment, but those tyres you can see already, actually, they've picked up, and I think we'll see Mark actually pull out a little bit from Eddie Irvine, because Irvine's tyres are going to be reaching the end of their useful life. Irvine has been out for some time. He's going to be due in for his third pit stop, I reckon, in the next couple of laps as well. So it may be that we're not actually going to see Irvine and hustling Blundell, because the fresh tyres may make up for the benefit in performance, really, or the advantage that the Jordan and Irvine should have.
Well, when you say a little bit, how about a lap?
And of the 23 starters who got away in Adelaide, there are just 11 of them left, 12 retirements, over 50%, and we are now on lap 60 with 21 to go. And into the pits comes third place for Eddie Irvine. Is he going to lose his place? Well, yes, I think he is, because Olivier Parnis was only 9 seconds behind him in the Ligier Mugen. I'm looking down the track as Irvine exits the pit lane, and there is no sign of Parnis. And Irvine rejoins in third position. So where is Olivier Parnis? He's late. He's late. Don't say we've got another retirement, but anyway, Hill, here he is. Olivier Parnis going through. Well, he's dropped a lot of time in comparison with Eddie Irvine. And into the pits comes Damon Hill, race leader, for his third and final, as far as we know, tyre and fuel stop. A lovely shot from the helmet camera. Plenty of time, no need to worry. No need to hurry things too much. Well, there's a problem. There's a problem with the left front wheel. Let's hope the thread isn't crossed. That would be dreadful. Well, it's just as well for Damon that he had such an enormous lead, 1 minute and 28 seconds, because a 22-second pit stop could have been very, very bad news indeed for him. But it wasn't. It really didn't matter all that much. You never want to stay longer than you have to stay in the pits. But Damon Hill is out, and assuming that wheel nut went on properly and was tightened and the retaining pin put in, he will not have a problem. I'm making a bit of a meal of that, because I remember a wheel nut coming off
Nigel Mansell's car in Hungary, and I remember a wheel coming off Nigel Mansell's Williams in Portugal. So wheels coming off Williams cars are not altogether without precedent. Let's hope it doesn't happen to Damon Hill. Lap 61, 81 lap race. Hill leads, there he is. Johnny Herbert is the only driver on the same lap, and he is 1 minute and 28 seconds behind. Eddie Irvine, a lap down, is in third position. He's 15 seconds ahead of Olivier Parnis, and the gap went up by 5 seconds on that lap I was talking about.
And we just heard that Damon Hill was 1 minute 20 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert. Then the graphic came up as being 58 seconds, and you can see there, that is the time that it takes to do a pit stop by the time that you come in and, of course, go out. But, of course, that, too, was with the lengthy stop that Hill had. And one assumes that there was some problem with the wheel nut on that left front wheel, but that Williams, knowing that they were not being pressurised in any way, took their time to get it right. But nevertheless, there is still a bit of a risk, I think, a greater risk than when everything goes smoothly. And Damon will be, I'm sure, but switch straight back into full confidence, knowing that everything is absolutely right. One of the interesting things about these cars, thinking about the braking and the Lacey incident particularly, is that one of the things that a driver has to do at the end of a long straight is actually brake very hard to start with and then ease off the brake pedal, because as the car slows down, the downforce progressively reduces, and as the downforce reduces, he has less grip. So as we watch Damon Hill coming down this main straight, when you see him brake into that hairpin from what's going to be 190 miles an hour right down to 40 miles an hour, he's going to be easing back off the brake all the time as he does it, as he follows in there hard, right up behind Gianni Morbidelli there in the footwork car.
39 seconds altogether then, Damon Hill stopped. You saw him stop for 22 seconds, but that was only the stationary bit, because you have to come into the pit lane, slow down, stop, and then when the jacks have been removed and the car is back on the ground, you accelerate away, and so that took him another 17 seconds, and that's something that people often overlook. He's on his 62nd lap now. He's coming up behind Gianni Morbidelli to lap the 5th place man in the Arrows Heart for the second time, and this will be an extremely heartening race for Brian Hart and all his men at Harlow in England. Brian Hart's men at Harlow did a very good V10 last year, a V8 this year. There are rumours that they will get substantial backing from Asia next year for their engine, whatever it is. Let us hope that is true, because all that Brian Hart and his men need is the money to develop their engines.
And Murray, the message from Barry Sheen down in the pits is to say that it was a crossed wheel nut, but everything's okay now.
My guesstimate was right. That's what it looked like, and that's what it usually is when they put a wheel nut on and they have trouble in getting it to run down the threads and seat properly. But there was obviously no panic in the Williams team, nor should there have been, and actually there wasn't any need for there to be, unless they seriously thought that they weren't going to get a new nut on, because Hill had so much time, as he still has. Lap 63. You can see a lot of rubber crumb on the corners. That is what is called the marbles in Formula One parlance, and believe you me, it's very easy to go off on them.
Well, if Hill is relatively cruising, then certainly just behind him Gianni Morbidelli is not. And this is Morbidelli's best race this year. Of course, we've had a lot of dropouts, but on the other hand, he's actually ahead of Mark Blundell, who's had no particular problems there. Things getting very tight indeed for Johnny Herbert as they come into the chicane. Herbert then coming round the Tyrrell there as Eddie Irvine comes in for another stop. Well, he's been in once. He's obviously got some kind of a problem there. They're putting a line into the car. I think that is that's an airline going into that car, and it's my guess that they have a problem with the pneumatic valves on that Peugeot engine, and that they are literally charging up the air reservoir to give those pneumatic valves a chance of completing the race distance. The air pressure was probably reducing. If they did nothing about it, the engine would have blown.
Well, in the interest of accuracy, and because we've given you some incorrect information, here is the definitive statement on the last 3 British drivers to finish in first, second and third places. Notwithstanding what I told you before, it was Watkins Glen in America in 1968 when Jackie Stewart, who was with us here in Australia, beat
Graham Hill, Damon's father, with John Surtees in third position. We all stand corrected and apologise. And thank you for your myriad of telephone calls. Don't think we don't appreciate them, because we do. Damon Hill leads the Australian Grand Prix on lap 65 out of 81. 57 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert. Olivier Parnis has now moved up into third position in the Ligier. Now, Parnis is going extremely well by virtue of the fabled Ligier Mugen reliability. He's had one second place in his career at Hockenheim for Ligier. He hasn't finished third yet, he's finished fourth, but he can still do better than that as Irvine comes into the pits yet again.
The thing that confused me earlier, Jonathan, was if it was a valve, I would have thought the intake would have been closer to the engine compartment rather than down there the front of the car. It may be an overheating problem and therefore pressurising the water system.
He's out. Eddie Irvine retires from fourth position. So yet again, the Jordan reliability problem has hit them. Gary Anderson, who is the Jordan designer, said yesterday, we've had no problems in qualifying and practice, we're saving them for the race. Well, he said that in jest, but sadly it's turned out to be true, and Eddie Irvine retires from what was fourth position, having been third for a long time. And now we've got an incredible situation as you watch the so far reliable race leader Damon Hill on his way, he hopes, to his 13th Grand Prix win. Of him leading Johnny Herbert, the only other driver on the same lap. Up into third place goes Olivier Parnis in the Ligier, potentially on 4 well-deserved World Championship points. Up into fourth place goes Gianni Morbidelli. Arrows haven't had it so good for a long, long time. Mark Blundell is now in fifth position, and so up into sixth position comes the Tyrrell of Mika Salo to give Ken Tyrrell's team a very welcome point. They're in seventh position in the Constructors' Championship with just 3 points, all of whom Salo scored.
Well, it looked very much as if Damon Hill's going to leave this track with tremendously warm memories of Adelaide. It's, of course, going to be his last race here, like everybody else, but to have been so competitive in the race last year before the tangle with Schumacher, which incidentally I'm quite sure had more to do with Schumacher's responsibility than Hill's. Before that, Damon was really driving well, and he's done that again throughout the weekend here. And interesting to reflect back on this season of Damon Hill, because he's certainly shown tremendous speed from time to time, a lot of the time, quite frankly. He had an absolutely marvellous pole position at Monaco, out qualifying Schumacher by 0.8 of a second. He had great pole positions in France, he had pole positions at Silverstone and also at Hungary. So he's had great performance in that direction. The strange thing is that after a year in 1994, when Hill arguably did not have one single off due to spinning or an accident, this year it's been completely different with these 5 offs that he's had during the course of the year, and 5 of them certainly due to his responsibility fundamentally, and one has to wonder why, because this is certainly a characteristic that Hill can change. He hasn't done it before in 1994. Is it just because he's had so much more pressure from the Benetton of Schumacher having more power with the Renault engine? Either way, I'm sure that over the winter he's going to take a deep, long think about it, try and get his mental state into a totally positive one in which he can assemble the best of his speed with the best of his dependability to make sure that he really is a serious championship challenger in 1996, because I reckon he really should be the favourite for it, quite frankly. We don't know quite how that car, the Benetton's going to go with a Berger and a Lacey in it, but either way, I think Hill should be in good shape, and this is a very, very good way in which to set him off for the winter.
Looking good for second place. You've just seen that caption which indicated that he's no threat in terms of lap speed to Damon Hill. Their best laps have seen Damon Hill go faster than Johnny Herbert, and the last lap the same thing applied. Indeed, Damon's lapping 1.5 seconds faster than Johnny Herbert at the moment. 63 seconds ahead of the Benetton, and he's on his 68th lap with just 12 cars left. No, with just 9 cars left now that Eddie Irvine is out of the race. How many of them are going to finish it? It's getting pretty thin on the ground. you might like to exercise your minds, those of you who were looking at the first 3 British drivers and working that out, when what the lowest number of drivers that have ever finished in the Formula One Grand Prix races. I think from memory it was 5, but I can't remember when it was or where it was. And Damon Hill, there he is leading. He, like Eddie Irvine, lives in Dublin. He, like Eddie Irvine, started his car career in Formula Ford, but we must never forget that Damon Hill originally made his name as a motorcycle rider, riding a 350 Yamaha. He scored 30 wins in one season at Brands Hatch as long ago as 1984. And then he went up from Formula Ford to Formula 3, where he won a few races. He never won a championship. Formula 3000, Damon was on pole, I think, 5 times in the season, but never actually won a race, largely because of car problems that he had. And then he got the prestigious job as tester for the Williams team, a job which has seen David Coulthard follow in his footsteps very successfully. And Damon was then pushing Frank Williams to be allowed to drive a Williams in Grand Prix. And he got his chance, he seized it with both hands. He's had a series of magnificent wins, 12 of them already, 6 of them last year, and 3 each in the preceding 2 years. And some very, very bad luck too, because quite apart from the contentious things, that's his board, plus 62.6. GH, of course, is Johnny Herbert, and Damon Hill is now on his 70th lap. 12 laps to go, including the one that he is on. So, at what point, gentlemen, Jonathan Palmer and Alan Jones, do you start to hear noises from the car which aren't really there, but which worry you in case you feel it might be breaking down?
Well, I think whenever things start to get lonely, which for Damon Hill's point of view has been for about the last 25 or so laps, I'm sure that he's been listening to all sorts of things going on, but I think Damon's going to be very good at just concentrating on the job in hand here, and just hoping obviously that it all keeps together. One of the best performances I really do think has come from Gianni Morbidelli in that footwork car, in the Arrows car. He's ahead of Mark Blundell, and really Blundell in the McLaren by right should be a long way ahead of not just Morbidelli but also Olivier Panis in the Ligier in 3rd place. And I wonder whether or not Blundell's got some kind of problem with the McLaren, because certainly in Mika Häkkinen's hands on the very first day of qualifying it looked like they were going to be, if not right up there with Williams, certainly perhaps mixing with Ferrari. And of course they were a long way ahead in the early parts of the race.
Well, the answer to question 2 in the Murray Walker tutorial is that the lowest number of finishers in a Grand Prix was 5. I was right there. I couldn't remember when it was. Oh, and that is Johnny Herbert! Johnny Herbert retiring from 2nd place in the Benetton, and as you can see there's a fire at the back of the car. What an incredible development on lap 71 in this 81 lap race with Michael Schumacher already out. Up come the fire marshals. It won't be a difficult fire to put out, but Johnny Herbert has now lost his chance of being 3rd in the Drivers' Championship because of that retirement. Schumacher wins the championship of 1995. Damon Hill is 2nd and cannot be beaten. David Coulthard, notwithstanding the fact that he retired long ago when he drove into the pit lane wall, will finish 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. Johnny Herbert will finish 4th because Jean Alesi, who might have been able to beat him, retired a long, long way ago. Well, my goodness. Herbert out. So now Olivier Panis moves up to equal, potentially, the highest finish that he's ever had in a Grand Prix when he was 2nd at Hockenheim in the German Grand Prix, because that's where he is now. And again, Damon Hill is a full lap ahead of everybody else. There's the confirmation, plus 75. Panis is the name, Panis is the man, and Olivier is now in 2nd place. I cannot remember when an Arrows finished on the podium, but it looks as though it's going to, because Gianni Morbidelli is 3rd, Mark Blundell is 4th, Mika Salo is 5th, and Pedro Lamy may be scoring the first point for Minardi this year.
Oh, Gianni, you can't do too much more of that now. You're well ahead of the 4th place person. third place. The Arrows team are going to be absolutely delirious with this. And Morbidelli's just got to take that car around. He's driven superbly. In fact, he's driven so well this year. Quite an underrated driver, in fact, and I'm delighted to see him get this result. And a tremendous tribute, of course, to Brian Hart's engine team in Harlow, who run on a fraction of the budget. Now, in comes Olivier Panis. What is Panis doing now? This is not a routine tyre stop. He must have, well, maybe it is. Maybe he's just done a rather extraordinary schedule. It looks like it is a routine stop. I take my words back, but it's only sort of 10 laps from the end, which is an odd sort of routine to do. Looks like it was, but back out there, what a great shame for Johnny Herbert, because he really had that in the bag. He was driving well. Maybe it was a transmission problem. That's the kind of thing that could have resulted in some fluid loss, and that something caught fire because we saw the flames. But either way, it would have been nothing to do with Johnny Herbert. And that was the first retirement from a mechanical problem that Johnny Herbert has had in the Benetton team with his car this year.
Well, fingers crossed for Damon Hill fans. He's on lap 73 in this 81 lap race with a full lap lead over Olivier Panis there in the distinctive blue Ligier Mugen. It will certainly be the highest finish that Mugen, who are backed very strongly by Honda. Indeed, it's one of the Honda family that runs the Mugen engine organisation. And Ligier have renewed their contract for 1996 with Mugen to use their V10 engines, and it looks as though they're going out on a real high.
A real high for Olivier Panis too, in a year that's really seen him lose a lot of confidence. Last year, he very much had the upper hand at Ligier when partnered with Eric Bernard, and I particularly rated him highly. He had a great finishing record. But this season, having Martin Brundle come in has really upset the Frenchman. Brundle has normally out-qualified Panis and often out-raced him. But it does seem here that, although it's difficult to tell, because of course there's such a big gap around, it's difficult to tell what the relative performance of the drivers would have been, and I'm sure Martin Brundle is ruining what might have been had he continued in this race. But Panis does seem to be driving with confidence. He's certainly not making any mistakes here, and it'll do his prospects for next year a great deal of good by finishing this race in second place, of course.
Well, riding with Damon Hill on his 74th lap out of 81, and the last time that an Arrows finished on the podium in the first three places was when Eddie Cheever brought one home in 1988. Damon Hill, clear track in front of him, jolly nearly a clear track all the way behind him now, with so few people on it.
And the closest battle, if you can call it a battle, on the track is for third place. Marc Blundell is 9.6 seconds behind Morbidelli. There are now just 8 laps to run, and it looks like Blundell is strangely not able to make any impression upon the pace of Morbidelli. There's obviously some traffic out there, but they're certainly not going quickly. But I suspect the tyres are in relatively poor condition by now. We can see that the track conditions have got, in a way, deteriorated. You can see the marbles and the debris around. And for many of these drivers, the cars are not going to be feeling particularly good. Many of them will have vibrations inside the cockpit, adding to the problem of seeing exactly where they're going. The visors will have long since shed their last rip-off. Look at the front of Damon Hill's helmet. Look at the debris, the oil specks, the dirt, all of that accumulates on the front of the car over the course of a Grand Prix. You can see it on the rear wing as well, all the frontal surfaces. And whilst the drivers have these rip-offs in front of their visors, well, by about perhaps 20 laps, 30 laps from the end, the last one will have gone. And when they finish this race and they open that visor, it's going to be like seeing daylight again. It's amazing how drivers can keep going, seeing so little. And that's what's going to be like for Damon Hill inside that car now.
Lap 75 out of 81, and Damon Hill is very close indeed, but to being able to say to all his critics, you were wrong, I've got the job done, and he's got the job done superlatively well, assuming he just reels off those last 5 laps that he's got to do. He's a lap ahead of Olivier Panis, second, who is a lap ahead of Gianni Morbidelli, third, who is 11 seconds ahead of Marc Blundell, fourth. Mika Salo is on the same lap as Morbidelli and Blundell in 5th position, but a long way back. And Pedro Lamy is up into the points, hopefully to score the first and only point for the Minardi team this year. They're a hard-trying team. They do a wonderful job. They've got a superb chassis. They've been hampered by the fact that they have a less powerful engine, but if they get a point, it will have been very well deserved.
Well, Damon Hill has indeed got the job done. The great shame for him is that he hasn't got it done in front and fighting against Schumacher and Coulthard. And that's really what he would have loved to have done here today. Yes, he'll be delighted with the win, but it's going to feel a bit hollow because his challengers all went out very early on, and he would have loved to have had the chance to beat them fair and square in a good motor race.
Ukyo Katayama out. The Japanese driver retires the Tyrrell as Mark Blundell drives through. It looked as though they were both going to finish. You can see what the problem is. It looks as though the Yamaha engine has said enough, and he was in 7th place, so potentially we have only got 8 drivers finishing the race.
Well, quite an achievement there, in fact. Katayama has lasted 75 laps at this circuit, which is about the furthest he's ever gone in a Grand Prix, I think.
Absolutely, I was starting to get a bit astounded because I thought, what a changing thing this Formula One is. When a very difficult circuit, people have spun out and crashed and burnt and carried on, and Katayama, who normally does that quite easily within the first 10 laps of any race, was charging on and looked like finishing in the top 10 quite comfortably.
Well, in fairness to the extremely likeable little Japanese, he's actually got 5 World Championship points because he's finished 5th a couple of times, he's finished 6th once. He had a much better season in 1994 in a better handling Tyrrell than he's had this year. And I think the appearance of Nikosalo, who is a better and extremely experienced and very determined driver, has got on top of Ukyo a bit.
Yeah, Salo, I think, is potentially a star of the future. He really has some very promising performances this year, but there's no doubt, and Tyrrell would be the first to admit it, this year's car has not been competitive. And I think another thing that's hindered Katayama, who undoubtedly was, to be serious, very quick from time to time last year, is that this year a light driver does not have an advantage because the car is weighed with driver. And bearing in mind Katayama is of minuscule proportions, he probably had 0.3 of a second advantage over Mark Blundell last year. So Katayama has lost his edge on that. But the shame of it is that I'm afraid he does still keep going off, and the statistics really do bear that out.
And the latest front from the lowest number of finishers, latest news from the lowest number of finishers front is that there were 4 finishers at Monaco in 1966, and Jackie Stewart was the winner. And has Olivier Panis got an engine problem? We thought we saw a puff of smoke from the back of the Ligier. My goodness, this race doesn't need to have many more laps if I'm right, because yes, there it is. Panis looks, yes, he's got a moving engine problem. Wow, and this could mean that Morbidelli will finish 2nd. Unbelievable. Damon Hill leads on lap 78, and you're watching the imminent retirement of 2nd place Olivier Panis. Listen to that engine.
Yes, Murray, I think that's going to let go in a big way shortly.
And if, sadly, Olivier Panis retires, it could mean that Mark Blundell will move up into 3rd place on the podium for the first time this season, having finished there 3 times in the past with different teams. And what a wonderful thing that would be for Mika Hakkinen in the Royal Adelaide Hospital after that awful crash of his on Friday. But Panis has obviously been told to keep it going, never mind what it costs, because this is the last Grand Prix of the year.
Well, I must say I'm surprised that that thing hasn't stopped yet, and the fact that it's still going, even now, indicates there might be a chance that he could get through another. He's got another 3 laps to go. It looks very, very, and sounds very, very sick indeed. It has to be unlikely, but he's still charging on. Let's look at his lap time. It was a 1:26. That means he's lost about 3 seconds in that lap. He really is on borrowed time. I can't believe he'll do it.
Well, Morbidelli is lapping 4 seconds faster than Olivier Panis, who is 2nd and whom you are watching. But Panis is a lap ahead of Morbidelli, and Damon Hill now is on his 79th lap out of 81. Just a few miles left to go between Damon Hill, race leader, and his 13th career Grand Prix victory, his 4th of the year.
Well, this is when Panis will have everything crossed, because he's in the best position he's ever been in a Grand Prix. He'll know that just for the grace of God go all the other guys that have gone out before him, but he'll just be playing, please, just hang on in there for a couple of laps. But on a lighter note, one of the crew of Channel 9 has actually had $10 on Morbidelli, who was 500 to 1, so he's got his fingers crossed as well.
And here are the retirements from the Australian Grand Prix as you watch somebody who we hope is not going to retire. Damon Hill coming through to complete his 79th lap and start his 80th at last for 1. Katayama has retired. Johnny Herbert, Eddie Irvine, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Gerhard Berger, Martin Brundle, Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, Roberto Moreno, Rubens Barrichello, David Coulthard, Taki Inoue, Carl Wendlinger and Andrea Montermini. And as you watch Damon Hill with just 8 cars in the running now, he's on his 80th lap. The order is Phil leading, a lap ahead of a very sick Ligier driven by Olivier Panis. Morbidelli is in 3rd position. 4th is Blundell, potentially 3rd if Panis does not go the distance. 5th is Salo, 6th is Pedro Lamy in the points for the first time, as is Minardi this year. 7th is Deniz, and 8th Bertrand Gachot's Pacific.
And Damon Hill's about to get a complete visor full of oil coming out of the back of that Ligier Panis, which interestingly actually went a second faster on the last lap. So clearly, whatever problem it is, it's more of a problem that maybe it's a piston, no, not a piston, maybe a valve or something gone on. He certainly sounds like he's lost one of his 10 cylinders. But look at the Hill, carefully going by that. He doesn't want to have any trouble here.
No, if that engine doesn't let go very quickly, I'm going to be very surprised. And Damon, tiptoeing his way past the Ligier, is very shortly going to be starting his 81st and potentially victorious lap of the Adelaide track. Damon Hill has completed 80 laps. He is into lap 81 for what looks like being, with only about 3 miles to go now, an absolutely magnificent win.
Indeed, I am absolutely delighted for Damon. He's had his tough time in the past, he's had an easy time here, but he's done absolutely nothing wrong. Pole position, winning the race, the perfect result. But if Panis can take 2nd place, that will be absolutely fantastic. A great job of resilience in the face of the engine problems he's got. But the real star will be Morbidelli. That team will be ecstatic, and quite rightly so too.
And Morbidelli is reeling Panis in. He was only 12 seconds behind him at the beginning of the last lap. Damon Hill is going to go the full distance. The others aren't, but don't have to, of course. The checkered flag will come out as soon as Damon Hill crosses the line, and everybody then finishes in the order that they were, irrespective of how many laps they have done. And Damon Hill is down the Jack Brabham Straight for the last time, round the Decaturville hairpin for the last time, into Paddock Turn for the last time. He can almost see the last corner, the Adelaide hairpin, and this is it. Damon Hill enters the last corner. Damon Hill exits the last corner, and Damon Hill wins the Australian Grand Prix, the grand finale at Adelaide. And Damon Hill slows down. Well, he's had a trying race. There is Gianni Morbidelli, and Panis has got through, and Gianni Morbidelli finishes 3rd in that smoking Ligier, a very relieved man. Sorry, finishes 2nd in that Ligier, a very relieved man ahead of Gianni Morbidelli. And the race order at the end of the 17th Grand Prix of the year is Damon Hill, his 13th victory, just one less than his great double world champion father, Graham Hill. And Olivier Panis was 2 laps behind the Williams Renault in 2nd place, 10 seconds ahead of Gianni Morbidelli in the Arrows Heart in the 3rd place. Mark Blundell finished 4th, 20 seconds behind Gianni Morbidelli, and 57 seconds ahead of Mika Salo's Tyrrell. So Tyrrell are in the points again, and Minardi did indeed score their first World Championship point this year. With in 7th place Pedro Deniz, the 40 driver. That's the highest he's finished. Indeed, it's the highest finish for the 40 team, because Pedro Deniz's 8th position in Italy was their previous best. Well, It's been a race of attrition. It's certainly not the first time that we've seen that in Adelaide. Only 8 finishers, and already the crowd has broken ranks, has swarmed onto the circuit and is up against the concrete pit wall to greet home the 2 cars you can see in the background, those of Damon Hill and Olivier Panis, first and second. Hill enters the pit lane, where with him you can see the crowd. And what a wonderful celebration there's going to be in the Williams team tonight. I know they've got a party organised, and it will be a super one.
Absolutely, and on that, slowing down that you could just hear the engine of Hill's Williams yelping as Hill was giving it bootfuls of throttle to the joy of the crowd, I'm quite sure. And I think that really must be very reflective of the great lifting of a weight off his heart that he's got here today. And it really does tell. He's absolutely ecstatic.
And look how delighted the whole pit lane was. In fact, the Benetton mechanics were all standing there cheering and waving their hands. Look at the crowd, fantastic. Record over 200,000 at Adelaide, the biggest ever for any Formula One Grand Prix.
Yes, Murray, it's a fantastic sight. Look at it, but just to reflect on what you said, Jonathan, Damon was really doing the 4-wheel version of a motorbike wheelie, to celebrate his victory, which is great because it's showing his character and it's showing how delighted he is to have won the Australian Grand Prix.
Yes, he's had a lot of stress for the last few months, and he's clearly got rid of a lot of that, certainly now. There's the expression. That's the relief of stress. This is just the result that Hill needed to finish the season.
Indeed it is. Dickie Stanford, the team manager for Williams, on the right. And now Damon with the car in Parc Fermé. The car's going to... There's Gianni Morbidelli in the background. Well, this is his highest finish. It's the highest Arrows finish for a heck of a long time. But there is the man. There is the man of Australia, Damon Hill. Here is Olivier Panis. Well, there's 3 tremendously happy first, second and third men as Charlie Whiting, the FIA's technical officer, gets the cars organised in the Parc Fermé. Look at Gianni Morbidelli. He's absolutely delighted. And yes, he is the Morbidelli of the great motorcycle Grand Prix racing concern. Olivier Panis takes his second place. That's his second place in a Grand Prix, and it will have done his future in Grand Prix racing no harm at all, because he was under a bit of a cloud at Ligier, particularly in view of the fact that Martin Brundle, the veteran who has been in and out of the Ligier team this year, was usually quicker than him when he came back.
Yes, Marion, just look at that crowd. 205,000 people. The best previous Sunday crowd was 127, which is in 1994. And the total estimated crowd figure for the 4 days of this event is 511,000, which is a record for the Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide, the best previous being 333. Now, Bernie Eccleston says that this result has gone into the history books as the largest crowd attendance at a Formula One race since the modern World Championship was established.
What a happy scene. Damon Hill on the top step of the podium, Olivier Panis on the second, and an overjoyed Gianni Morbidelli on the right. Conducted by the versatile Damon Hill. Oh, well, what a load this must have lifted off his shoulders. The Honourable Dean Brown, who, as you see, is the Premier of South Australia, presents that trophy, and Damon must regard that as one of the best he's ever won. He's won 12 Winners' Awards before, but this one will be probably the sweetest of them all, in view of the criticism he's had this year, which he has justifiably wiped out here at Adelaide with a quite magnificent drive. Olivier Panis gets the trophy from Ian Cox,
who's done so much to help this Australian Grand Prix at Adelaide. Such a superb event. The best of the year, the most enjoyable one for us all to come to. And Gianni Morbidelli gets the trophy for third position. He certainly never had one as sweet as that. So it's a very different looking finishing top 6 in Australia, with, although Damon Hill's a familiar winner because that's his 13th win, it's a long time since we've seen Parnish up there. It's the first time that Morbidelli has been up there. Mark Blundell, a super 4th place ahead of Tyrrell's Mikasalo. 2 more points for Tyrrell, and Pedro Lamy, that single points that will matter so much to the Minardi team. And Damon Hill, victorious in Australia, goes into the winter looking good for the championship in 1996 with Williams.